Baltimore City Trauma-Informed Care Task Force. We are live streaming. This recording is live on YouTube. We are looking forward today to hearing from one of my friends and a really good person who's been doing some amazing work for a long time in the space of supporting our elders, who's going to talk about trauma that impacts older adults, which I think is an important part of the conversation. So everybody say hello to Kim. Fantastic. And we're also going to have a little bit of time for committee work, as well as around the horn. So, Anne, if you could put the agenda in the chat, and I think we can go ahead and get ourselves started. The round question tonight is, if you could be guaranteed one thing in life besides money, what would it be and why? And so Anne is going to put us in groups. The agenda is in the chat. Again, the rounds question is, if you be guaranteed one thing in life besides money, what would it be and why? And let's go ahead and get started.
All right, we are going to come back at 5:35. So I'm opening the rooms now.
Is it okay if I don't join a room?
I put you with Iris so that you two could chat. This is the live stream room where people get to talk to me if they join me.
Well, I hit the not join thing, which means that I don't have a little thing that says I can join. But but I wanted to like try to not make it look like my bedroom. Actually, it's my daughter's. I'm sorry to hear you had COVID. Damn.
It was fairly miserable.
Were you in pain?
No, not in pain, just sick. So I really slept and slept and slept and slept. So, hi, council member. I am assigning you to a room, and they will give you the prompt of if you could be guaranteed one thing in life. Oh, and they're all gone.
This is better.
So
just totally exhausted, but the kids were sick, so they didn't want you to be sick, right?
We felt like dominoes. So I was the last, which was great because then Andrew was better by the time I fell.
Let me do these things. Let me get some stuff straightened up here. This time crept up on me really fast. Okay, timing wise, I'm at 5:40-ish. I end at 6:10, 20.
Let me look at the agenda. And I can, give me 1 second. Yeah, 5:40 to like 6:20. You get a good chunk of time actually if you want longer.
Good. Will you give me a 15-minute?
Mhm.
Thank you. Oh, no baby now.
I looked so dumb asking that question because I only saw Miss Ann and Miss Kim. And I was like, am I the only one here for a moment? I was like, am I not supposed to be here? Am I in the wrong meeting?
Hi, Ania.
You're in the right place.
Hello.
We're so glad you're here, Ania.
All right, so welcome back, everybody. Again, really excited for tonight's presentation. I'm going to do a quick intro before handing the mic to Kim Burton. So I got to know Kim this at the beginning of the pandemic. A number of folks got together to create what we called Baltimore Neighbors Network, which was a mental health wellness check for seniors, where we made a huge amount of phone calls to seniors who we know were both the most physically vulnerable to the worst impacts of the virus, but also were in many ways the most alone and isolated during the pandemic, and especially at the beginning when folks really didn't know what was going on. And so Kim was one of the driving forces behind this network of people who we got with all the colleges and universities, the schools of social work, some of the schools of nursing. And what was the number? How many calls did BNN end up making?
Yeah, we made over 40,000 phone calls.
Yeah, over 40,000 phone calls to seniors across Baltimore. And we partnered with what was the nonprofit that Amy's organization?
Pro bono counseling.
Pro bono
project.
counseling.
Sorry. So we partnered with them. If folks needed additional support, we would connect them with a clinician from Pro Bono, and it was great. And again, Kim was a driving force. She has been at the Mental Health Association of Maryland. She's the senior advisor for older adult programs, and she is just an awesome human being. So with that, really excited to have Kim talk to us a bit about some of the work and some of the trauma that older adults experience.
Thank you so much, Zeke. Thanks for the nice intro. Thanks also to Anne and Iris for putting this together. I have been long awaiting to talk to this group of people and very eager to get older adults on your radar for more work with regards to trauma services, trauma-informed care. I need to be made, who gets to share?
You should be able to share. Is it not letting you? I can
I should have
fix
figured
that
this
real
out ahead
quick.
of time. No. Is it saying that I can, Anne?
It should let you. Is it letting you?
Well, let me do this. I can go like this, and I can. Sorry, folks. I should have figured this one out a little bit earlier. We tend to do that. Can you all see my presentation? Yep. Awesome. Okay, great. Great. Well, I am going to just try to run through a lot of information and a little bit of time So let's get started. I'm hoping to cover a little bit about stigma and demographics related to older adults. Their numbers are amazing. Some information about trauma with the understanding that you know a lot about it. Some information about our older adults in Baltimore City and the late life issues that they're experiencing. I want to hit on suicide, which is understudied and I think represented in the work that we do around older adults. And then definitely leave with some messages of hope and recovery and some resources. But I like to start with this slide here because I think we have been really good at developing services and agencies and categories of work that is appropriate to different developmental stages. And if you just look at this picture and imagine birth through, let's say, age 30, all of the different developmental stages of life that we know to target. And we know to target this because we know about the brain and we know how people develop, and we know that as they develop, they have different needs and issues. And then typically the way it's been in the United States and elsewhere around the world is we just kind of, like, older adults all get kind of lumped together in the same group, and they're often shown in pictures as with their canes or with their walkers. And this is definitely a stigmatized age group that does have a lot of different needs and developmental issues, and needs all the services that younger people need too. But it's more difficult for us to be able to target it specifically because it's not a homogeneous group. There's variety obviously across the age range, but when you get to 80 years old, you might have two guys named Ed, and one is living in a nursing home and one is running a marathon. So that makes it challenging for us, but we do have a lot of work that we need to do. So this slide shows you the expected rise in the number of older adults in the United States. On average, 10,000 people turn age 65 every day in the United States. And so you can see that rise across the bottom there from 1900 on. We've never, ever had people live as long as they are living now. And so that is one of the big reasons that we don't have services already prepared and systems of care that are friendly and appropriate to older adults. We're building the plane as we fly it. That's what we used to say for Baltimore Neighbors Network. But there's really not a good excuse for doing that anymore because we know what the projections are telling us and we know what to expect. And we have a lot of science and we have a lot of data, and our systems are not catching up with this. And this is really a major concern. In Baltimore and Central Maryland, I wanted to show you this slide of the number of people over the age of 60, and it's a projection from 2015 up to 2030. And you can see that the largest number of individuals over the age of 60 live in Baltimore City, followed then by Anne Arundel County and then Baltimore County. I work for the Mental Health Association of Maryland. I've been there for 20 years. We knew that these numbers were coming. We used to do work statewide. We still do work statewide, but because of the increase in the number of older adults, just the sheer numbers of it, we're having to target a lot of our work in Baltimore County and Baltimore City right now. And I am the person who is doing the work, education and advocacy, mostly education, in Baltimore City. I want to throw that out to you because I'm hopeful that after our time together tonight, you might reach out to me so that I can provide education in your networks and in your communities about the importance of these things. So let's go back to the fact that we have this 35-year chunk, this long period of time that represents old. People always say, what age are you talking about when you say old? And that's a hard one to answer too. But we usually go with 60 to 65 because that's when benefits kick in for people. But I'm sure you know the people in this picture here, at least you know Elijah Cummings. That's him with his mother. And when this picture was taken, he was in his 60s and she was just about to hit 91. And I wanted to show this picture for a couple of reasons. First of all, because it just shows that within this age span of 35 years, between 65 and 100, we have very different people with very different experiences. But really, it's her age group, individuals who are over the age of 80, that are our fastest growing segment of the population in Maryland. We have a very diverse state, as you know, a very diverse city, and that means that they've got all kinds of different perspectives and experiences. They have all ranges of health problems. They have ranges of wellness as well, quality of life differences, excuse me, and aspirations for the future. And that's something I want to hit on, because too often I think that the message is that there's really, like, aging is a downhill experience. All you have to do is go to the party store to see that that's the message around aging. When you go down the party store aisles and you pay attention, you'll see that by the time you hit 50 or 60, everything's about, rest in peace, and here are the pill bottles, and just it's very pessimistic, and that's really not the way older adults experience it. By far and away, older adults say that their later years are very satisfying times of their life, and they still have things that they can contribute, that they want to contribute. And I do see kind of a cultural shift around this as the baby boomers are coming along, because they're not taking no for an answer, and they are definitely asserting themselves and doing the things that they want to do throughout their life, which is fantastic. I took my kids to a documentary on the Rolling Stones, and they were jamming on their guitars, wrinkly skin and all, just in their 70s, I think they were, and doing what they love to do. And that's what we should want and expect for all of our older adults. They were also raised in a time, we need to be cognizant of this. They were raised at a time when they didn't know much about behavioral health. When things that were traumatic happened, it was something that was usually kept within the family, or maybe not even shared within the family. So I'm guessing that a lot of people on this meeting tonight feel comfortable talking about trauma and understand a lot about it. That's not the experience that I have with the majority of older adults. So there's not a level of understanding and comfort in that demographic generally as we have in younger generations. So this is true about trauma. This is true about mental health problems. This is true about substance use disorders. And all of those issues have a lot of stigma around it, especially among older adults. And unfortunately, that stigma serves as a primary barrier for them to reach out and get the help that they need. So let's talk about trauma for a second. I have this picture of a glass of brown water. Wanting to talk to you about trauma in this, if you took drops of yellow, drops of green, drops of blue, and put it all in water and stirred it up, you'd have a glass of brown water. And you can't then extract the yellow, the green, the blue. And I want to make that a metaphor for an individual, especially an older person, who has lived a long life, certainly experienced trauma in one way or another. And that trauma may be early. That trauma might be right now. That trauma might be something they experience on a regular basis in their community. So a good example of that is crime. I've talked to a lot of older adults in senior centers, and I hear their fear. They talk to me about not wanting to take public transportation. They talk to me about not wanting to go out of their homes once it gets dark. And so there is a general fear that a lot of our older adults are carrying around. And some of this fear may be based on trauma that they had experienced when they were younger. And so they're just being vigilant and they're taking care of themselves. We know about ACEs, right? Our adverse childhood experiences. I can tell you, when I talk to older adults, very, very few of them have ever heard about adverse childhood experiences. And when I talk to them about the science around this and about the findings that there are certain experiences in particular that raise the risk for people then to not have their brain develop in typical ways, or they suffer problems with social, emotional, occupational, educational tasks, and that rolls up into the adoption of health risk behaviors. So we know that then people who experience more trauma in their history have higher rates of addiction, alcoholism, drug use, lower rates of educational attainment, unfortunately, might be involved in relationships that aren't safe, engage in activities that aren't safe. And as a result of that, we see people who have disease, disability, social problems, and an early death. So for older adults that have had these kinds of past traumas and experiences, they might be more medically and socially complex at a younger age. We, in the lingo that we use, we talk about them as being geriatric-like at an earlier age. And I'm hoping that all of you know what geriatric means and understands what a geriatrician is. I used to do presentations and ask people in the audience if they knew what a geriatrician was, and I'd ask them to raise their hand, and very few hands would go up. But if I asked them if they knew what a pediatrician was, every hand would go up. So it's time for us to know what a geriatrician is, because we have more older adults in Maryland than we do school-age children. That's a fact. So we have a lot of catching up to do, a lot of education to do to our older adults about the proper healthcare that they need later in life. Oops, went the wrong way. So this little box here, I have to say that the population that I work with are individuals who are at this place where they are experiencing challenges. If they have a trauma past with adverse childhood experiences, they are experiencing oftentimes these kinds of issues. And they do it most often either in silence or with a smile on their face. This is not a group of people who were cultured to talk about their problems. They were cultured to pick themselves up by their bootstraps and forge on. And I think it's time for us to really open the door and our safety nets to them so that they can relax into the hope for treatment and recovery, because it doesn't matter how old you are, you can always heal. I like this quote from the Adult Protective Services. I'm hesitating because I can't read it because I can see all your faces. There we go. The term accelerated aging is used to describe how PTSD may manifest differently in older adults, relating to issues in attention, memory, and executive function. Elevated stress hormones and changes to brain structure, these occur more extensively in older adults coping with trauma. Often the effects of trauma or accumulated traumas express themselves in behaviors such as agitation, disorganization, and self-neglect, which may be seen as normative cognitive decline. And that's where this quote ends, but I would like to add that people also see it as normal aging, because we have an artificial idea of what normal aging looks like. Depression is not a normal part of aging, and certainly dementia is not a normal part of aging. All things that we need to be learning more about and teaching other people. I put together this slide because it reminds me of a lot of the older adults that I work with who are seen and unseen, and some of the issues that they're struggling with. And as I had said before, many of our older adults go through hard times with a smile on their face. They seem to be a very resilient group. And that's what I think of with the picture on the far left. We have, especially in Baltimore City, a lot of grandparents who are raising their grandchildren. not something that they expected to do, something that they do as best they can, as I have seen, but also struggle with. So as much as they love their grandchildren, it's very challenging to raise young ones in this day and age, especially if you don't have the physical and functional ability to keep up with them. My son works for a program with kids just north and east of Patterson Park in a neighborhood there. And when I pick the kids up on Saturdays and Sundays, I talk to their grandparents who are enormously relieved that the kids have somewhere to go because they are exhausted. But it's also, beyond that, it's a financial strain. So we do have caregiver programs, but we certainly don't have enough support for the burden that older adults have with regards to caregiving. And in this picture, I've got, what looks like a grandmother with a granddaughter, but we have a lot of older adults who are also taking care of family members and loved ones who are declining because of age and that they need help. In senior buildings, I see older adults helping their neighbors in ways that you just wouldn't imagine. And while it's beautiful and it's wonderful, it's very taxing on their health. In these pictures here on the bottom right reminds me of a woman that I met at a senior center. She was getting food and she was telling me that she doesn't have enough money to buy food. She never has enough food. She's always feeling at least a little bit hungry, but she never wants to burden her children by telling them that. I see the woman kind of in the middle at the bottom, knowing that isolation and loneliness are huge issues among our older adults in Baltimore, especially during COVID. And that the Surgeon General of the United States said that the toxic effects of loneliness are equivalent to the toxic effects on the body of smoking 1 pack of cigarettes a day. So it is a physiological response that people have, and it's dangerous. In the middle on the bottom there is a picture of elder abuse, and that is a very real concern that we have for a lot of our older adults. Many, many, many older adults are living alone, but many of them are living with family members who love them. But unfortunately, family members are more likely than other people to be the abusers in relationships with older adults. That's a lot of stress that isn't taken care of. Although others would disagree that caregiver stress causes this. Whether it does or not, caregiver stress is very real, and we do not have appropriate supports for our older adults. And then the guy I'm staring at right now, who is probably out there working, he's aging, but he's doing his darndest and still can't meet all of his needs. He's living in his car. And we have a growing number actually of older adults who are experiencing homelessness. And I hear from advocates about this problem because a lot of our homeless shelters and services aren't able to take care of older adults who have complex medical issues or who have dementia. And that is a quickly growing population as well. So if you all went through Psych 101, then you will remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I draw this to your attention right now because it's relevant to our conversation. When I referenced before that we don't call or shouldn't think of aging as a downhill experience, I mean it. We all strive to kind of go up this triangle here, to have the things that we need in our lives so that we have meaningful relationships and engage in the community in the way that we want, and then reach, our personal pinnacle. And aging doesn't mean that then, you roll down that hill. But what aging does do is it presents a lot of challenges that can poke holes in the stability of these different levels of need. So I want you to think about that for a minute. We should all expect that as we get older, we are going to bump up against things that are setbacks. And we hope that we have the resources financially, in terms of family support and community. We hope that we have the resources to kind of help us move on or overcome the setbacks that we have. But that's not true for a lot of people. But even if it is, let's say somebody is very well supported, but they've fallen down and they've broken a hip, and they're 70 years old and they were hoping to work another couple years, but that doesn't look like that's going to be a possibility. They have to suddenly be on a lot of medications. They have a lot of rehabilitation they need to go through. They start to think about, wow, am I able to go back to my home? I have a lot of stairs. I don't know if I can live there anymore. And these are all the kinds of things that older adults would think about when they break a hip that younger people probably aren't thinking about. Younger people might be thinking about, how can I get it together so that I can run the marathon next year? So it's just a very trying time. Here are common late life trauma experiences. Significant compounded losses. So obviously they lose people that they love. It just is something that's going to happen more as we get older. But also a lot of people that I talk to explain that they feel a loss of community because the communities that they're living in now are so very different from the ones that they were living in 40 and 50 years ago, especially if they're in the same house that they've been in for 40 or 50 years. Things don't look the same. So there's also kind of a sense of loss around that. We know that sensory and functional decline is just a natural part of aging. So what does that mean? That means our vision might go, our hearing might go, and guess what? The average person with hearing loss waits several years before they get a hearing aid. That's crazy. What we know about hearing loss is that it contributes to isolation and loneliness, and from there contributes to depression, and from there contributes to cognitive impairment. This is real serious stuff. In terms of injury and illness and pain, I think the number is 80% of adults in their 70s have one chronic condition, and 77%, I wish I could remember off the top of my head, have two chronic health conditions. Whatever. Chronic health conditions in later life often involve pain, often involve some functional decline, can cost money and time just in terms of having to go to the doctor's office and to keep up with the management of chronic conditions. And then there's the whole medication thing, the expense of medications and the cost of medications. So these are just to show you the different kinds of stressors that can compound all within this short 30-year period of time. These late life trauma experiences can also be triggers for trauma that people experience in younger years. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Some of the reasons that trauma isn't revealed are obvious to us, right? First of all, I second in the bullet point, but should be at the top. As I said earlier, this is a generation of people that were not cultured to talk about things that were problems or things that were bothering them. They most of them desire to be fiercely independent. And it can be a source of shame or guilt or blame if they talk about things that happened to them in the past that were problematic. They may not want to open old wounds. They have fear of judgment from, oftentimes from family members. Many of the things that happen to people in their past are kept secret for years. And so it can be very difficult for them to open up and have these kinds of conversations. And then they wonder what that might mean for their legacy. I used to work in nursing homes, and I was a 20-something year old social worker in a 190 bed facility in Seattle. And I can't tell you the number of older women who wanted to talk to me about sexual abuse that they had experienced when they were younger. And I should rephrase that. They didn't want to talk to me about that. They had to. They had to because it was at the forefront of their mind and their anxiety was sky high. And what I've learned over the years when I've really dug into trauma is that these women who would tell me that they hadn't told their family, none of them had ever told their children. Some of them had told their spouses. All of them had experienced this sexual abuse when they were younger, before they got married. So here now they are in a nursing home, ripe with triggers. They have people that they don't know coming into their room late at night. They have people that they don't know very well who are taking off their clothes and helping them to go to the bathroom and giving them showers. And all of these things are enormous triggers. So it's no wonder that they were experiencing extreme anxiety, but they were also the same people who were feeling like they were having heart attacks. And so at our nursing home, we were always sending people who thought they were having heart attacks to the hospital, and they would return and they would say, no, their heart is just fine. And we would leave it at that. Really what they were experiencing in retrospect was panic. And there's no reason that we should have older adults who are living out their final days of their life experiencing that kind of thing. The other thing that I found neat in that experience, though, was how their ability to talk with somebody who was independent of anybody that they ever knew provided them some relief. So it's never too late for that kind of help. So themes of trauma is that an event is unwanted. The person feels like they have little or no control over that event. And the result is a sense of helplessness or despair, possibly depression or anxiety. And I use this picture here of this man because I just feel like it says so much. But it also represents the population with one of the highest suicide rates in the United States, and that's white men over the age of 80. And this is a guy, if you just look at him, you can imagine that he was probably not cultured in a time when he felt comfortable talking about the pain that he was feeling. I think about how many of these men I've talked to that when they leave our conversation, they put a smile on their face and they walk out the door and they go home. And unfortunately, older adults have very high rates of suicide, and we're not asking important questions when we do have opportunities to talk to them. So this is a picture that represents if there were 100 attempts at suicide in adolescence, on average, there's one death. So get that, one death for 100 attempts of suicide among adolescents. And among older adults, we see one death for every 4 attempts. That's phenomenal. And there are a lot of things that we could be doing to help prevent this from happening. I say that also knowing that a lot of older adults are very intentional in their suicide attempt. It is not at all a call for help. They use the most lethal of means. They're less likely to recover from any injury, and they're also less likely to be found in time to be saved. So, with regards to behavioral health, what I want to say here is that older adults really come to the attention of behavioral health professionals when there is a problem. But as I've said several times, this is a good cohort of people who can minimize their problems or hide their problems or decide that their problems aren't as significant enough to talk about. And I also hear that from older adults. When there are resources, scant resources, they want those resources to go to kids. So in the world of advocacy, it's been very difficult to get older adults to really speak out the way we can get younger adults to speak out about the needs that they have for behavioral health. There is absolutely a lack of access to appropriate geriatric care. And that is for physicians, but that's also for people who work in behavioral health. So as the number of older adults is going like this, the number of people going into the workforce for older adults is like this. And we have a growing mismatch. I'm really hopeful that we can be doing more with peer support, which is something that we're working on at the Mental Health Association of Maryland, to see if we can kind of bridge the gap, because we know that we're not going to be able to develop the professional workforce that we need, given what the demand is. Unfortunately, our older adults are often over-medicated and undertreated. And by that, I mean, we are quick to give a pill, and that's it. So in nursing homes and assisted living where I have worked, and in other places, even when I talk to older adults who go and see their physician, they come back with an antidepressant medication, but they don't come back with a referral to counseling. And we know that non-pharmacological interventions are, I want to say more important, equally or more important than pharmacological interventions. And unfortunately, the medications aren't safe for some of our older adults who are on other kinds of medications. And then just to pull out substance use disorders, right now, older adults are our fastest growing group in need of treatment for substance use disorders. And we lack a system of care in the substance use disorder world that is geriatric appropriate. So this quote here that I need to move you guys to be able to read: few doctors and nurses working in primary care and geriatrics are trained to recognize even common mental health symptoms among older people, much less post-traumatic symptoms and reactions. Their lack of knowledge means that PTSD in the elderly is often misdiagnosed as schizophrenia, alcoholism, antisocial personality disorder, or depression. The root causes of chronic pain or sleep disturbance, for example, go unexplored. Even professionals who work specifically with survivors of elder abuse often lack training in trauma-informed care. And I think that's a primary message that I hope to get across to all of you tonight, that we really need to be doing more in trauma-informed everything around older adults, and not wait until it's a problem, to start early, acknowledging that a lot of the things that they're going through just by virtue of growing old present stressors and challenges that then pose risks to their health, pose risks to their mental health, and pose risk for early decline and mortality. I'm going to give you a real quick story about this person here, Betty Jean. This is a picture of Betty Jean in, I think, maybe the 40s, at the age of 7. She's 7 or 8 in this picture. And by this time, her parents had already divorced, which was very unusual circumstance in that day and age. By the way, she lived in rural Iowa. She had a father who was advanced alcoholic who beat up her mother pretty regularly. She witnessed that often. Fortunately, her mother did divorce the father. They moved away, but there was a lot of shame around that. Betty Jean was sexually abused routinely by a family member, but nobody knew that this was happening to her. So Betty Jean, by the way, she was named Betty after her mother and Jean after her father. So when Jean, the father, became the no good husband, no good dad anymore, her mother changed her name to BG and wouldn't call her Betty Jean, would only refer to her as BG. So her name had to be changed because of the shame and trauma around her younger life. Anyway, at about age 18 or 19, BG, who was doing very well actually in high school, and she was a swimmer, and she had a boyfriend that she loved very much, but she became pregnant. And at that time, that was completely unacceptable. Even though she grew up in a neighborhood and a home that was very well resourced, they struggled with what to do around this pregnancy, and they ended up sending her to a home for unwed mothers somewhere in North Dakota, which I think is a pretty commonplace. I'm hearing about that as all kinds of institutions. Nonetheless, she went to this home for unwed mothers in North Dakota. She delivered the baby there. She was allowed to breastfeed the baby for 2 weeks, and then the baby was taken. She didn't know that the baby was going to be taken and that she'd never see it again. She did know the baby was going to be given up for adoption. There was no way she was going to be able to bring that baby home. This was a huge, huge family secret, and nobody was to know. And everybody in Iowa who knew her had been informed that she had gone to California to take care of an ailing relative. So this was a secret that she kept with deep shame for a very, very long time. So then let's fast forward to BG in her 60s, where she's developed depression, anxiety, alcoholism, and has a big sense of hopelessness. So BG was one of my very favorite aunts. And I remember her as a hilarious woman. She was totally eccentric, but she always had a drink in one hand and a cigarette in the other hand. She slept with the television on. She said she couldn't bear to not have voices around because she was worried all the time. She always read the last chapter of a book before she started the book so that there weren't any surprises. She locked everything. She locked doors, triple locked doors, quadruple locked doors. She had trouble holding jobs and staying in relationships. And this was the woman that I knew. Those were just the little foibles that not foibles, eccentricities, I guess. That's what we attributed those to BG, when in fact, they were really reflections of a life of trauma that she had lived and ways that she had learned to protect herself and get through her feelings. So in her maybe early 70s, she called me one night. She revealed that she had a baby. This was a secret. Her pregnancy was kept a secret. She told me about it. She was tearful. She was drunk. She said that she was pretty certain that the baby had died. She had a dream about that, and that was her feeling. And she didn't feel like she really had a reason to live anymore, because for all these decades, that was really the only hope that she had. And she had been silent about this hope her whole life. So she was hospitalized. When she called me suicidal, she asked me to please not tell anybody in the family. And I did. And the police came and they admitted her to a hospital. And she didn't speak to me for a very long time. But she got into recovery. She got into recovery for addiction. She got into recovery for her mental health problems. She became a volunteer. She gave lots and lots and lots of money to people in her community. It was single mothers who wanted to do fun things for their kids. I can't tell you how many families she sent to Disneyland. That's what she did. She started writing poetry. She became a sponsor to other people. She turned into everybody's favorite person. And in the end, somebody that loved her very much found her daughter, Jill. So at the end of BG's life, she had gained so much just after the age of 70. And I tell this story because it's so important to know that those last years of her life were very rich. She gave to others. She contributed to her community. She had a fantastic life, and that's the way it should be for others. So knowing that I've probably gone over time, and also knowing that Anne will be sending these PowerPoints out, I just want to tell you, by the way, these are the things that, the dimensions of recovery from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. If you're trying to think of ways that we can improve recovery options for older adults, these are the areas that they often need most focus. And now I will just quickly skip to slides I have from the Mental Health Association. When you get this PowerPoint and you click on these pictures, they will link you to fact sheets that we have on loneliness, stress, mindfulness, suicide in later life. And then we have this fantastic guidebook on mental health in later life, and a trifold brochure on how people can keep their brain healthy as they age. That guidebook, by the way, has a companion document if people want to start a guidebook study group where they actually use this book, which is about 91 pages. They can explore all kinds of issues around behavioral health and mental wellness and aging. And that, by the way, on the cover is my mother-in-law in her 70s paddling out on the Chesapeake Bay. And we really use that book to help focus on positive aging and things that people can do to be as happy for as long as they can. And I, once again, want to thank Anne and Zeke for having me today. And I hope that you reach out and we can work together on spreading some of this important education.
Awesome. Please give a huge, huge round of applause to the great Kim Burton. Thank you, my friend. Does anyone have any questions? I see Dr. Phil with his hand up. Phil, take it away.
I guess one question, and I don't know whether this is a conflict of interest. There's another Healing City group movement that's having a big symposium and things. And I thought your presentation was wonderful. I think, I think the planning committee is still working on having those things, but I think it would be great to have, if you could, I forget which day is the session, Anne or Zeke would probably know, or the other people. Because again, I think getting the message about the elders and seniors out there, both the strengths and assets they have, but there's a whole bunch of inequities and structural things. I think spend a lot of time thinking about both the racial stuff and particularly young people. But the person who's been living in their neighborhood for 40 years and the neighborhood's totally changed, even though they still have the same house, is experiencing all kinds of traumas and stuff. So I just really learned a lot from your presentation. I really enjoyed it. So one is to see whether we might be able to get a session there. And then two, in the chat room, I think it would be great to have, I don't necessarily thinking about these committees, so I don't know what their structure is, but at least putting together a work group of folks that want to get back with you and bring some other people in to think about the trauma and elders and both supporting them, but also supporting positively. I think we spend a lot of time talking about, reinforcing and supporting the people that are, reaching out for all the different age groups, raising up the young people and other things. And I think in Baltimore, we have a lot of seniors, as you gave examples of, they're doing amazing things. But they also, need the recognitions and the supports, and at some point may need help themselves. And I just think that again, from the task force perspective, as you said, in Baltimore City, we have a lot of elders. It would be great for us to make sure that we're trying to make be as caring for them as we have for some of the other groups.
Thank you, Phil. And I'm hopeful that if it resonates with other people too, they will click on those fact sheets. You can download them to send them out to people, or you can print them out to distribute them. And that's a way where we can expand our reach on this important information. Thank you.
Yeah, and Phil, Kim does have a proposal in for the Healing City Summit. So rock and roll on that. I think it's a great idea. I do think, share a little bit more later. I think it's a really underappreciated group within our city. And I think there's a lot more that we can be doing. Councilmember Ramos.
Thank you, Councilman, and thank you, Kim, for everything. This was really amazing. Just two things. One is we are, in my district, we are forming a group with lots of partners. I have a lot of women in particular aging in place and not in the best conditions. Mm-hmm. And so we're working with Gilchrist that just moved into my district. And Rebuilding Together, Hubs, and several others to literally take a couple of blocks, work directly with those seniors and get them what they need. But I don't have the mental health aspect of it. And so I'll be reaching out to you to figure out, what that would look like. Because I have a constituent who swears that she's hearing noise coming from next door, and this has been years and years, and there's no construction going on next door, and so I don't know how to help her.
Mhm.
And so that leads me to the second thing is if you can help us, maybe not today, but in a separate slide or something, what are the resources that we should be doing? When I talk to seniors and they're having what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to get them help? And that can also help their families, because that's part of this work, to get them the help that they need. Because I think a lot of times we just don't know. So those resources will be helpful. Yeah, Gilchrist moved to Stadium Place. So I am excited about that. But yeah, thank you very much for that presentation. I really appreciate it. My mother-in-law is 90 and she's still on the go, and her mind is, she swears by the New York Times crossword. That's what she does every day to keep her mind together. She doesn't even cheat. She doesn't know how to do Google. So she'll call John, my husband, but so everybody's at a different level. And I think that's also, challenging. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Look forward to talking with you.
So 2 questions, Kim. One is, I think one of the somewhat missed opportunities in Baltimore that I'd love to see more of is intergenerational work, particularly from young people and older adults. Like, I don't think we do a good enough job of facilitating opportunities for young people to learn from, as well as teach, and just listen to and gain wisdom from our elders. So I'm curious where you see any models of like really good intergenerational work happening.
Somebody from Hopkins might be able to remind me of the program that Linda Freed oversaw, which has a lot. Experience Corps, thank you. Yes, Experience Corps, which has existed for a while, where older adults are working. It started with kids in schools and they may have expanded by now, but the data is amazing as to the health benefits for older adults, and also how it improves lives for kids. That's just one. I'm sure there are lots of models. I do know that there are lots of models. What I envision is how many older people have wonderful skills and talents that they'd love to share, and how many kids would love somebody paying attention to them, teaching them new things and learning things, and how do we put them together? So yeah, Zeke, it's a win-win, a win-win-win.
Yeah, it just seems like, at least from my own experience, I was really close with my grandma before she passed away. And it was like healing for me, like at points where I was struggling to just talk to her. And I think it worked in both directions. So second question, and this is like kind of my own personal interest somewhat. Both of my parents do a lot of work around end of life and sort of improving the process by which we die, and the way in which families and physicians and people themselves have agency in end of life conversations and so on. And I'm curious, you mentioned high rates of suicide among older adults, and that was a really, really interesting. Like, I did not know that's the fastest growing group. I am kind of interested in how you differentiate between someone committing suicide versus someone who is in terminal pain, is has a diagnosis, who may be experiencing dementia and a whole bunch of other physical symptoms. Like in Maryland, we still have not passed any kind of death with dignity law, although they've tried a number of times. But I'm just curious, like your kind of thoughts on the state of end of life care and how to differentiate between suicide caused by depression or whatever else versus death with dignity.
Right. Yeah. So we have a conversation that's growing that isn't a conversation that we've had in other generations. And it's a tricky one. In my opinion, and I know from the Mental Health Association and people that I've worked with on this issue, where we believe that people should be empowered to make decisions. We also want to make sure that they're not making a decision born of a mental illness that is treatable, born of despair that comes from depression. So I can't say the mechanisms, but we would want to make sure that the assessment tools are in place to make sure that that the person is making an informed choice that is not coming from the place of despair that's born of an illness. But we also have to understand that depression is an illness that comes with many other kinds of chronic conditions. So that's really what makes it tricky. But unfortunately, too many people stop the conversation before we fully have it, in my opinion.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, again, really appreciate both the work that you do and the amazing presentation. You know, again, I think it's a it's a group, it's a constituency that just doesn't get enough support or attention. And I know that there have been times when the Commission on Aging in Baltimore has been really strong, and then there's been other times where elders in our city just haven't had as much clout. And I think that's a real shame. So really appreciate you lifting up, especially issues around trauma, mental health, just information that I think a lot of folks, myself included, don't know and don't really appreciate, because to your point, I think there's a lot of suffering in silence and putting on a smile. But that's really helpful for us to know. So again, I really thank you, Kim, and thanks for the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Zeke. And just want to make sure everybody saw in the chat box about heart smiles, because that sounds like a super great solution to what you had been talking about earlier.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right.
Take
Thanks,
care, everybody.
Appreciate you. And
Appreciate you
always
too.
feel free to stop by the Trauma Informed Care Task Force.
Okay. Thanks all. Bye-bye.
See ya. All right. So to keep it moving, I know that we've got about 30 or 28 minutes. I'm hoping that we can spend some time in subcommittees. Really excited about some of the work that has been going on, and definitely want us to keep pushing forward. I'm going to, again, rotate a little bit, but excited to get into the conversation. And if you would, bloop us into our little groups.
I will bloop us. Yes. Just as a heads up, the youth group is taking their turn on the main feed tonight. So you all will be here. I will try to monitor as sometimes folks get kicked off, but for all of the youth group, you are the largest group, you will stay. Otherwise, I'm opening rooms for people to join their breakout. I'm also posting in the chat the agenda, and your documents are all linked in that agenda.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all here. So let's do just a real quick hi, everybody. How's everybody doing? If we can just introduce yourselves real quick, because we have some people who haven't been here before. Dr. Phil, you want to get us started?
Okay. Hi, I'm Phil Leaf from Johns Hopkins. I'm the oldest person in the group.
Daniel.
Hello, I'm Daniel Parsons. I'm a teacher at Frederick Douglass High School. Teach English. I'm still pretty old.
Lydell.
How's everyone doing? My name is Lydell, Truth Power Organizer Black. I'm an organizer and do some youth programming as well. And I guess I'm like the oldest young person.
You're right at that cusp. That's right. Thanks. Elijah.
You're on mute, Elijah.
There it is. I'm Elijah Davis. I'm a photographer, returning citizen, and I believe I may be the second oldest in the group.
I appreciate that you think that, but we'll keep moving.
Yeah.
Brendan McFadden.
Hello, sorry, I just came back from the restroom. I'm Brendan McFadden. Are we just introducing ourselves?
Yep, that's it.
Brendan McFadden. I'm a teacher here in Baltimore City. I believe I'm the teacher that's on the task force, so I hold that.
Thank you. Ania?
Good evening. My name is Sania McNair. I'm with Healing Youth Alliance and Heart Smiles and Not for Sale Youth. And I'm go to school at Morgan. I don't know why I keep forgetting that.
Because you're doing so many other things. Thanks, Ania. Janet?
Good evening, everyone. Janet Abrahams with the Housing Authority of Baltimore City. I am the president and CEO of the Housing Authority of Baltimore City, and we're responsible for running the affordable housing program here in Baltimore.
Thank you. Brandy?
Hi, everyone. I'm Brandy Cunningham. I am the program coordinator for Healing Youth Alliance. And I don't know if we're still doing the age thing, but I'm just going to say I'm 30, wherever that fits in. That's where I'm at on the map. It's lovely to see everybody.
Thanks, Brandy. Bree?
Hello, everybody. My name is Diarbre Lewis, but everybody calls me Bree. I'm an 18-year-old senior at the Baltimore Polytechnic Institute. I'm a Healing Youth Alliance ambassador and also a Heart Smiles Heartbeat.
Thank you. Teresa Bruce.
Good evening, everyone. Teresa Bruce, Baltimore City Public Schools social studies teacher, and I just hit a new age bracket at 35. Like when you fill out surveys, you got to do your age group bracket. I just hit the new one this month. I don't know how I feel yet.
Well, happy birthday. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Damani.
Hello, how you doing? My name is Devontae Thomas. I just attend Morgan State. That's about it.
Nice. Oh, we got some good MSUs up in here. My son goes to Morgan State as well. So, all right. I think we got everybody. My name is Kyla Liggett Creel, or Dr. K. I'm with the University of Maryland School of Social Work. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. The past couple of weeks, we have been focused on our fourth goal, which is to address housing insecurity among youth. The goal that we set was the youth homeless rate will decrease. And these are numbers that we sort of put in because that's what we had, but we should be updating to decrease it from 243 to 200 by 2023. So in the next year. And so we had some next steps that we talked about doing. Lene and Gemma aren't here this evening, but they have set the goal to have a discussion with Heart Smiles on a live session by the end of January. I'm sorry, of February. It'd be great if I could read. So that is still in the works. And Iris, who is one of the staff people who work on this project, has reached out to Jesse Stevens from the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services, and we're just waiting to hear back. And Dr. Leaf, do you have an update for us on the homeless advocacy groups?
Not on the homeless advocacy groups.
Okay. I know that you were reaching out to them.
Other than one of the things that's very concerned is we're about to hit some, they're doing a lot of work on trying to make sure there's housing for people, and that some of the people that have youth are having trouble because there's some places that if you have a male that's over 15, they can't come in with the family. So they're very concerned because of the cold. It's supposed to get really cold tonight, tomorrow, and Saturday. And we've actually had about 5 or 6 people freeze to death this year, homeless people. So that's one of the things that they're working on. And I think I had got sent around the note around the number of homeless people at city schools has, although I'm not sure who I actually sent it to. So I apologize. I might have sent it to Anne as opposed to sending it to the committee. But well, let me go look in my my notes, or maybe she passed it on to you.
You did send it to Anne, and Anne forwarded it to me, and I can certainly pull it up. I didn't know if it was something you wanted me to show or if you just had numbers that you wanted us to insert here.
Well, I think it's good to the inserts because they're cities. The federal government passed some legislation that define homelessness, which includes people who are couch searching and other things. And therefore, the school system has a legal responsibility to be able to be providing certain services for them if they meet the criteria. So again, as a task force, that's looking over agencies and things, it strikes me that maybe one of the things that we want to pursue, and I know that there's a concern because from the city schools perspective, that it has to do with housing, but it also has to do with transportation. It has to do with food. There's a number of entities that homelessness in general has, but when we're talking about youth, they often don't have control over any of those things. They don't drive necessarily. They don't make the decisions about the food. And even whether they move or not, they usually are not voting whether they should move or not. It's usually the adult in their household that makes those decisions. So they tend to be, the houses that have youth, I think, tend to be a lot more transient, moving from homeless to not homeless, or from being homeless in one setting with an adult family member, but then they sort of, the family becomes overextended, so they have to move to a niece or to a grandmother or something. So I think those are some of the things when we're talking about both the numbers, also thinking about the nature of homelessness, which may be a little bit different for the youth, children and youth than they are, and than they are for some of the other groups.
Absolutely. And yes, I mean, that makes a huge difference in the services. Do you have the numbers in front of you, or we can come back to you in a little bit?
Let me try to find it in my notes.
Okay, you're good. I'll go on to more follow-ups and then we will come back when you have that up. And again, I have it so I can pull it up as well. Next, we talked about having focus groups so that young people would facilitate focus groups with other young people who have experienced or are experiencing unstable housing. And so my job was to reach out to the Children's Cabinet to see if they had any ideas about funding that could be accessed, approximately $5,000, which would all go towards young people, to the facilitators of the focus groups, and then also to the participants of the focus groups. I did reach out. They were very kind and very supportive, and they have invited us to write up a brief proposal, just saying this is what we're suggesting that we do. Brandy Cunningham has volunteered to write that up with some of the youth who have done some of the focus group work. So our plan is to go ahead and submit that and see if we can get the funding to help that go. And the goal would be about 20 youth that we would do focus groups with. But again, the questions would be developed by youth and the sessions would be facilitated by youth. So it'll be a totally youth-driven process. Let's see, Lydell did share the resource guide information, and I believe Iris sent it out after our last meeting. Looks like, Phil, you may have updates already.
I found my notes. Yeah, so city schools, based on their legal definition of homelessness, which does include it means not having a permanent house surfing, they define as homelessness. They currently have identified 3,600 students in Baltimore City Public Schools who they define as homeless.
I'm assuming that doesn't count kids in foster care or group home situations.
if they're in group, I think you're right that if they're in group, they're not living with their parent, but they're not homeless. They're in a home where there's not a family member that oversees it. That same thing would be true for youth incarcerated by the Department of Juvenile Justice. They probably are not considered homeless, even if they were homeless when they got arrested.
But that does bring up an important issue that when kids are in foster care, one of the things that as a clinician, I advocated for regularly is that if a child is in foster care and goes to Douglas and then loses that placement and is moved to a different placement, that the parents would sort of be like, well, then they have to go to the new placement. They have to go to school at Renaissance. They can't go to Douglas anymore because it's too far and transportation is an issue. And so we were able to advocate with the school systems to say those kids should still get transportation. And it's more for elementary and middle school because, a 7-year-old shouldn't really take a public bus by themselves to school across the city. And so we've been able to advocate for that, but it was really having to do both Department of Social Services and the school system to say somebody has to do this so this kid doesn't lose their family and their friends and their favorite teacher all in one move. So I think there have been caveats that kind of took that into consideration, but it took advocacy.
Yeah, I guess I think it's an important number to consider kind of for the situation that you're talking about, like for someone to be able to gather data on someone who's housing insecure requires that there's a sort of chronic issue involving housing insecurity. At least there's a accountable situation where that they have experienced housing insecurity. So many of our students that I've seen to have housing crises, though, are students in group homes or in foster care who are kicked out on a Friday, can't get in touch with DSS over the weekend, have nowhere to go. And are homeless either for the weekend or homeless indefinitely. I think it'd be helpful to have at least the number in addition of students who we might put in a category that may not count as homeless, but like at risk, homeless at risk or something, at risk of losing placement.
Absolutely. And do you think it would be helpful for the next meeting or 2 meetings from now to have somebody from Baltimore City DSS to talk about like those issues and how they're trying to address it and what the interaction with the schools are? Because it sounds like we're all saying, well, we know this is an issue that happens. So would that be something that people would like to have an invitation extended to DSS to help with that conversation? I see yes.
Yeah.
I have another suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Santalisa has created an advisory work group, and I know she has youth who are involved in juvenile services, and I think from social services. I think it would be helpful to ask whether homelessness has been identified, because she created it to make sure, as opposed to just having, high achieving students who in student government or something be on it. She wanted to make sure it was more representative of the population in city schools. I don't know whether being homeless was one of the criteria to ensure that there was a homeless student on there that's going to be meeting her regularly to deal with that. But I think it would be I don't know whether one of our committee chairs makes the ask or whether the Zeke as the chair of the overall group makes the ask. I don't think it's going to be, I don't think it'll be seen as offensive or not. I think just sort of asking, is that one of the groups that's represented? Informally, Rashad Staten would know. He's the coordinator for that. So, somebody just sending him an email or a text. Because I'm just being oversight. I don't think they want to say, no, we don't want them on there, particularly when you have 3,600 students that meet that category. It seems to be a large enough thing that you'd want to have represented to make sure if you're developing policies, that's not a group that's inadvertently being made inequitable just because their particular challenges weren't considered. So again, another thing that, just making that ask and then seeing whether it results in them being added if they're not in, and if they're not added, if they actually have a homeless person in there, it might be somebody who can then link in with this work group because they can help us to think through some of the educational issues and then bring it back to the other group within city schools that they're also meeting with.
Awesome. Lydell, as the chair of this group, would you like to talk to Rashad about that? Would you like that to be communicated to Zeke? What would you like to do?
So I guess, yeah, I could represent the group on that, but I'm thinking like, should he just like come to one of these meetings? Like, should we also invite him to come to one of these as well? Or I think that might be effective just because it's like the whole group is here at the same time, but also we can make it happen in the meantime. I could like prep him before a meeting as well. Like,
yeah. So it sounds like maybe two steps regarding that. Oh, this thing. One is that you would be reaching out to him just to talk about it and see about that ask of, is there a young person who is housing insecure on that advisory group? But then two, inviting him to this so that he can be part of the conversation. Does that sound about right?
yeah. And what was it, Dr. Phil, what was the name of the advisory group?
I don't, there's probably a formal name. Let me try to track it down. But if you just say Dr. Santalise's student advisory group, he'll know what it means. And I just think, because there's actually a meeting with Dr. Santalise around the different advocacy groups and getting updates. And so I think getting an email to Rashad today, or I mean, not today, but tomorrow, would be helpful, because that group's meeting next week. And I guess, because he would know right away, because they were categories. So he'd either say yes or no. And I think even just in the memo saying, if they're not represented, would it be possible to get a homeless student added? And I think right, he would say yes. He'd work on it. And then by the time he comes back to meet with us, because we're not having a meeting for 2 weeks, they might have already been included with the meeting with Dr. Santalises.
Okay, I'll reach out to him, but there's also another group, if that doesn't pan out, that should be invited anyway. With they're called Youth Action Board, and so they work on employing youth who have been who experience homelessness. So they should also be active on this issue. And also wanted to know if there's anybody who wanted to join the Youth Homelessness Action Committee. They actually just met today. They meet monthly, and that's where some of the folks from Youth Action Board and Continuum of Care, which that's housed in, will be sitting. So that's one thing, is if any of our folks also want to join that committee to help them develop their resource guide, which Iris shared out. And then there was also, if we were going to be in the process of inviting DSS, we might also want to invite the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services, someone from there to share what their office has been working on in regards to the homelessness issue in Baltimore.
Yep. I'm happy to do that, since I talk with them anyways.
The Youth Homeless Advocacy Group also went out of business, lost their funding. So the group that was really working with a lot of youth, getting them homes and supporting them, went out of business. And so that may be something and following up with.
Were you talking about Youth Homelessness Action Committee or Youth?
No, there was a group that's on Charles Street. I'm blocking on its name.
Yeah, Youth Empowered Society.
Youth Empowered Society, which had, it wasn't only for homeless, but they had a lot of homeless youth there. And my experience with them, it was really very good. And they also had a lot of youth who were working. It wasn't just old people telling youth what to do. They had hired a lot of youth. They were doing a lot of work. And there's also a lot of people become homeless because of their sexual orientation or other things. And so they were doing a lot of work with that group also. So there's a lot of concern that group that had been very helpful suddenly lost its funding, and is now, that the groups that, they were dependent on, not we're working with them no longer have that support?
Okay, so I have a couple of to-dos, but I want to check in with Bree and Ania as the young people here. Are there other groups, we're sort of talking about groups of kids who may be experiencing housing insecurity and needing to get some of their systems involved in this conversation. So we've talked about kids in foster care. We've talked about kids involved with DJS, reaching out to the school system. Are there other groups in particular that you all would say we need to be thinking about, and groups that we should be inviting to this meeting?
I would say like most of the recs that are like in the communities, because I know like a lot of kids go to the recs for like the to like get the food, or like just to sit there, just to have somewhere to be at for it, like the moment or whatever. So I would say like the recs.
And we usually, somebody here usually is here from Department of Rec. Are they here tonight? I don't know, but yes, absolutely. We will make sure and reach out about that. Other recommendations that you all think we need to make sure are in the room? Okay. All right, so are there other things that we need to, because I'm looking at the time, are there other things that we need to be following up on besides some of the next steps that we've already written on this form as far as moving this forward? We have Lydell reaching out to Rashad Stanton about asking about the advisory group, and if there's a youth who's experienced housing insecurity, Lydell will invite Rashad to upcoming task force meetings. Dr. K will reach out to Baltimore City DSS. Dr. K will invite Mayor's Office of Homeless Services, and then the Youth Action Board. Is somebody reaching out to them to invite them? Lydell?
Yeah, I'll reach out to them.
Okay. All right. And I know that the person who works with Rex is invited, so hopefully they'll be at the next meeting. And then we have Gemma and Lene will work on doing the live session on Heart Smiles. We'll wait to hear back from Jesse Stevens. Wait to hear back from the homeless advocacy group. And we will try to submit that proposal for the funding for the focus groups before the next meeting, which is in 2 weeks. Is there any other to-dos that we should be considering or lifting up?
If we were able to write up a paragraph tonight, this opportunity just came across my email yesterday. So basically it's from Baltimore Community Foundation, and they're looking to support kids. They just wrote kids, schools, mental health, COVID. And I know that we're about to do the focus groups around obviously like trauma, mental health. So I think this could be a good opportunity. It's kind of just like it looks like they have a deadline to get these funds out. So I think they're saying they just need a paragraph, so we can write that up. It looks like it's due tonight or tomorrow.
Can we vote for tomorrow?
Yeah.
Lydell, can you send me the link for that? And we'll try to, hopefully it's due tomorrow, because I can definitely do it by tomorrow. I can try to get it done tonight.
What was it?
It was Baltimore Community Foundation. It's not even a link, it's just an email. So I'm just gonna forward you the email.
I think it's due today.
Okay.
Right? Okay. Yeah.
I can still try to.
Because they helped 3 different groups write one for today.
Great. So I will work on that tonight then, because I have a template for another proposal that we used anyways for a focus group. So if we're thinking about accessing this for funds for the focus group, I might be able to just not quite copy and paste, but close. So Lydell, if you can send that to me, then I will go ahead and take care of that tonight.
All right. Yeah, it's in your inbox now. And I'll just let her know that you'll be submitting something.
Awesome. All right. Thank you all so much. Appreciate you as always. You can access the to-dos on this shared Google Doc. I hope everyone does well, and I will see you in 2 weeks. Thanks.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.